Hello, you're listening to Wine Blast with me, Susie Barry, and my husband and fellow Master of Wine, Peter Richards. Welcome. In this episode, the podcast is going to live up to its name because we have some explosive content about developments that could change the world of wine forever.
What an intro.
I know.
You know, a proper cliffhanger, with suspense and drama and everything. But I can confirm this is not to overstate things. In this programme we have controversy, we have groundbreaking research, we've got threats of violence, we've got a glimpse of a brave new wine world. And if that wasn't enough, we've got some breaking news for you too.
And that's what I call added value. And this show is all about the grapevines or grape varieties of the future. So the stuff that's going to be in your glass in 10, 20, 50 years' time, and it's potentially all change. Here is a taster of what's coming up.
The future is always changing. We cannot do exactly the same that our grandfathers did. So I think that the only solution for the future is to change the variety. Changing variety, we will keep the quality in our wines.
We have not explored the potentiality of the grape genome at all. Why stop the exploration is nonsense. Those plants, in some decades, they may substitute completely the known wine varieties. And this is what the people which are very conservative may be scared about.
I hope that this innovation can be very useful to save the world of wine. This should not scare people at all.
Winemaker Nicola Biasi, Dr. Riccardo Velasco and Professor Mario Pezzotti there. We'll be hearing more from them in due course, as well as some views from Champagne Drappier. These are all people right at the cutting edge of this topic, so their views are gold dust. Plus, we'll be giving our reactions to all of this, as well as to the wines in question.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. So wine is made from grapevines, right? Typically, one species of grapevine, Vitis vinifera, the wine-making vine, of which there are many different varieties like Chardonnay, Pinot Noir or Cabernet Sauvignon. So far, so good?
Right, yeah. But also not good. Because while wine is glorious, and these grapevines and grape varieties are very tasty, these vines have a problem. It's wine's dirty secret that to get a healthy crop of grapes, such vines often need a lot of intervention, primarily in the form of anti-fungus sprays to control diseases like downy mildew, powdery mildew and botrytis bunch rot, particularly in humid, cool or rainy climates like much of Northern Europe.
In fact, viticulture or wine growing has, as the fashionistas would say, an oversized impact in this regard. A recent academic paper noted that while only 5% of the European agricultural area is devoted to grapevines, approximately 70% of all fungicides applied in Europe are used to control fungal diseases in vineyards. Another paper had wine accounting for 26% of all fungicide and pesticide use in the EU. Now, whatever the exact figure, most wine growers would agree that anywhere between 3 and 30 sprays per season can be necessary, and that is far from ideal.
Because, of course, these sprays can pollute, disrupt natural ecosystems and degrade biodiversity. You also need tractors to disseminate them, which means soil compaction and carbon emissions. And on top of this is the risk for human health, both the vineyard workers and those people who live near vineyards.
And sadly, it's not as if being organic is necessarily any better. The sulphur, copper and other sprays allowed under organic rules can be less effective than synthetic versions. And so more sprays can be needed, hence more emissions and damage. In short, to make wine, as things stand, you need to spray, and spraying is not good.
To up the ante further, the EU has implemented the Green Deal, where the goal is to reduce the use of sprays and such like by 50% by 2030. That's a big deal and a huge challenge for wine growers in particular. What to do, they clamour. Change is imperative, change is inevitable. But what will this change be?
Well, this change may be coming to your wine glass soon, because one major solution currently being touted is essentially tinkering with the grapevines themselves to make them more resistant to the main diseases that afflict them. Now, I'm aware that makes it sound easy, it isn't. But there are a couple of ingenious potential solutions currently underway.
Yeah, one solution is the development of vines that are simply less susceptible to disease. This can be done in two main ways. One is biotech, or gene editing, sometimes called assisted evolution, or TEA. This is different from GMO or genetic modification, and it's one we'll come back to. We've got some big news about a landmark new planting that's just happened in this regard.
Now, another approach is breeding. Disease-resistant vines that have been bred are sometimes called PIWIs, PIWIS, which is a slightly unfortunate but also handy acronym of a long and frankly unpronounceable German name.
You're not going to give it a go?
No, definitely
sure.
not.
No? Give everyone a laugh, including me.
I am not having a go at it.
Fair enough.
It's a PIWI.
Yeah.
The reason is because Germany was where these were initially developed. They're essentially vinifera vines like Chardonnay or Riesling or Sauvignon Blanc that have been crossed. So cross-pollinated, then developed from seed with another vine species to give them resistance or less susceptibility to these key diseases. Now, this process creates an entirely new grapevine variety.
Now, historically, hybrids, which is essentially what PIWIs are, had a bad rap when it came to wine. American or French hybrids often had a so-called odd, foxy flavour, and there was a fear they'd somehow corrupt the noble or elite vinifera varieties of Europe. But the development of PIWIs, or the new generation of hybrids, came at a time when disease resistance was becoming increasingly important and attitudes had shifted.
There are a fair few of these PIWIs around now, aren't there? I mean, hundreds, in fact.
Yeah.
We've mentioned some on the pod in the past, but you may recognise names like Solaris, Rondo, Voltis, Vidal, Divico, Sauvigny Gris, Floreal, and they often crop up in places like Germany, Austria, Switzerland, Languedoc, Canada, and northern outposts like the UK and Scandinavia.
As for the downsides, well, they take a while to develop, about 25 years on average, apparently. Plus, the criticism often levelled at them is that they just don't make very nice wine.
Well, as our fellow MW and viticultural consultant Stephen Skelton told us, with PIWIs, you trade quality for sustainability. Plus, getting people familiar with a host of new wine names is an unenviable task for producers and marketeers, especially given people have had about a millennium to get used to the existing ones. And that's still, frankly, a work in progress, isn't it?
Say that again.
Seriously.
Which is, it's understandable. It's complex. Isn't it? But,
is.
the latest generation PIWIs are starting to gain traction among wine growers. Plantings are growing, albeit from a small base. They have an increasing number of vocal advocates, some of whom we're going to be hearing from. And the wines, based on our tastings, the best PIWI wines are pretty decent these days, aren't they?
Yeah.
As people get to grips with how best to grow them and make them, which, to be fair, was always going to take time.
Yeah. So one advocate of disease-resistant vines is Italian winemaker and consultant Nicola Biasi. Nicola grew up in Friuli and worked all over, including South Africa and Australia, before dedicating himself to Allegrini's estates in Montalcino and Bolgheri for 9 years. When he left to be a consultant winemaker in 2015, he started his own project in Trentino. Vin dell'Anneo, which is one of the top-rated wines in the Gambero Rosso Guide, not bad for a PIWI wine. He's also created a producer network of wineries he consults for that are making and promoting disease-resistant varieties, which is called Resistenti Nicola Biasi.
So Nicola initially came to our attention when I attended a seminar he gave in which he said that the only way to meaningfully reduce chemical usage in the vineyards is to use PIWIs or resistant varieties. Now, after tasting his wines and being really quite impressed, we invited him over to pick his expert brains.
Nicola stresses the urgency of adopting resistant varieties and maintains that if the right resistant variety is grown in the right place and made in the right way, there is no quality difference with a classic variety. In his view, quality is everything. He says people drink good wines, not sustainable wines.
Yeah. He's actually just bought a vineyard in Mosel in Germany where he's planted the Johanniter disease-resistant variety to blend with the more classic Riesling. But his main focus is northern Italy, where he works with these new varieties everywhere from Friuli to even that bastion of tradition, Piedmont. Now, he'd like to see Italian law change so that PIWIs can be planted in Tuscany, where they're currently banned, and also for them to be allowed in the top-level DOC and DOCG wine classifications, which is also currently outlawed.
And just to say, in this chat, you will hear gene editing being mentioned. Hold that thought. We will be coming back to it. But you asked him, didn't you, do we really need to change varieties?
Yes, we have to change our varieties, because with the traditional variety, we in every place of Italy, of Europe, maybe just in the south of Italy not, but we have to spray many times, and every time that we go in the vineyards with the tractors, we produce CO2 and pollution, and this is not good for the environment. With the resistance variety, we can reduce the number of treatments from 15, 20 to 2, 3, 4 or 5. So the reduction is so important.
So you have done direct comparisons, haven't you, between vineyards which are next to each other, planted with conventional, traditional varieties and resistant varieties. What have you found?
We found that the difference is huge, because the CO2 goes down of 40% and the water footprint goes down of 70%. So with the resistance variety, we can be truly sustainable.
So in your opinion, if a winery wants to be truly sustainable, it should be planting PIWIs or resistant varieties. Should be planting resistant varieties.
Yes, of course. Today is the best way to put together quality in the glass and truly sustainable. I don't know if in the future something different could come, and with the network Resistenti Nicola Biasi, today we are focused on the resistant variety, but we would love to do something different if it is truly sustainable. So today, in my opinion, the resistance variety is the better solution. But if in 10 years will be something better, why not?
Well, I wanted to ask you about that, because there is obviously in Italy at the moment, there's been some new plantings of gene-edited Chardonnay.
Yeah,
so some new
I know,
plants.
from Trento, yes.
From your neck of the woods.
Yeah.
What's your opinion of that?
My opinion is why not? Because I really believe that we have to produce quality wines with the better sustainable possible. If we can find a way that is not dangerous for the human, for the people, okay, why not? The future is always changing. We cannot do exactly the same that our grandfathers did. We have to do something more, because the climate change, because everything, because the customers want to drink something different sometimes. And so respect the terroir, respect the tradition, but we have to change. And so everything that can help me or the wineries where I'm consulting to make better wines and would be more gentle with the environment, why not?
Because the classic criticism in the past of using resistant varieties is you trade quality for sustainability. The perception being that actually these resistant varieties, they're good for the environment, but actually they taste crap. So what's your response to that?
In the past, we make not so good wines from PIWI variety because we didn't know where plant this variety and how to make the vinification. Because, Chardonnay, all the world works to find the better solution for vinification, for pruning, etc. PIWI variety are new, the resistant variety are new, so we have not enough knowledge. And this is exactly what Resistenti Nicola Biasi is doing with the university, with other producer, to understand how to make quality wines, because the potential in the vines there is just up to us.
And are people, ordinary wine lovers, are they ready for resistant grape varieties?
I would love to say yes, but I'm going to say no. It's something that we have to explain. It's so important because I really believe that if someone understands what there is behind the label with the resistance variety and in the glass find a good wine, they will buy them. Because if the quality is exactly the same, you cannot say, no, I prefer a wine that produces a lot of pollution. No. But the people doesn't know about resistance variety.
So you think the laws will evolve to embrace these varieties and allow them in the wines in the future?
Yeah, of course. They will be part of the future of viticulture. Of course, we are not taking out all the Sangiovese from Montalcino next year. It will be absolutely wrong, because we have to keep the identity of the terroir of the Brunello and Montalcino. But the question that the winemakers, the producer, has to do by themselves is, if the climate change continues in this way, what can I do to keep high the quality of my wines? Because today everybody say, okay, you can plant at high altitude or you can go to the north. But it's really, how can I do it? Of course, in the theory, you can do it. But if my winery is in Montalcino, what I have to do? I sell the vineyards and then move to Austria? Probably it doesn't work. So I think that the only solution for the future is to change the variety. Of course, we have to change the rule, because, for example, in Montalcino, you can use only Sangiovese. But we have to change the rule and change the variety. So changing variety, we will keep the quality in our wines. And why not with a resistance variety that give us the quality? Usually this variety keep the acidity better than traditional variety, and this is good for the climate change, because we need acidity in the wines, and also for the market, that probably today the people drink wines lighter than in the past, more fresh, more elegant, and so the acidity is so important. And also the resistance variety give us something on the top that is the truly sustainable.
How do you see the future when it comes to wine? Are we going to be growing just resistant varieties in 100 years' time?
No, of course not. But I hope that many vineyards, especially in the area where we have a lot of rain, will be cultivated with the resistance variety. But there are some places where we don't need them. Could be, I don't know, some area of Argentina, some areas of the south of Italy. We don't need them. I'm the first one to say that. But in a lot of places in the world where we make the viticulture, they can make the difference. So we will have a lot of vineyards with the resistance variety. And how I see the future with the viticulture and winemaking that is more respectful of the environment.
Nicola, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
So he's saying that resistant varieties can also be good when it comes to climate change, given they can have slightly higher acidity, which is often needed in a warming climate.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think what's nice is he's not dogmatic; he's just quite pragmatic.
Yeah, he is, isn't he?
But he's pretty clear about the need for change, for evolution in wine growing and winemaking. Where he's also quite honest is how hard it is changing the law to get these varieties accepted, and also getting this message across to wine drinkers.
Yeah, I mean, that's just going to take time, isn't it? But as he says, if people start to become aware of these issues, I think most drinkers would choose a good wine that's more sustainable over one that's not. It's just making that a simple and understandable and clear message and choice, isn't it?
Yeah. And also making sure the wines are really good quality.
Yes.
So we're going to be recommending a few of Nicola's wines in the end of the show. Spoiler alert, they are pretty good. And before that, don't go away, because we've got some cutting-edge researchers throwing all kinds of funky notions and predictions around. By way of brief summary so far, winemaking vines are being reimagined in an urgent bid to reduce their environmental impact. Disease-resistant vines, or PIWIs, are being bred and increasingly adopted by forward-thinking growers, but they remain paradoxically both somewhat under the radar and controversial.
One leader in this field is Dr. Riccardo Velasco, director of the CREA Vine and Wine Research Centre in Cornigliano, so Prosecco country, in northern Italy. Now, Riccardo has been involved in plant breeding for more than 30 years, and lately he's been developing an exciting new grape variety for Prosecco, where the classic or traditional variety is called Glera. His new disease-resistant take on Glera is called Glaurum, a Glera-based hybrid, and which he hints may be even better than the original. So I asked him that. Can the new disease-resistant variety ever be better than the original?
It may happen, it will be rare, but it may happen. In any case, what you're looking for is a product which do not affect the quality of the well-known wine.
Because the traditional criticism of PIWIs or resistant varieties is that they taste worse than normal conventional.
Not always. What I can say to you is that if you start with 300 plants to make a selection, the possibility to get a better plant than a better wine than a mother plant is almost zero. If you start with 10 or 50,000, the possibility to have one or two or three, which may be, I don't want to say better, but still high quality, bit different. Okay, I have selected and sent to registration to CPVO, the entity that recognized to register a new variety. I sent in Germany, because I cannot certificate my own, obviously, the first daughter plant of the Glera cross, which is 85% of metabolic profile identical to Glera. 85% is a lot, plus 6 resistant genes, and the 15%, which is not identical, is close. So I don't think that this plant product will affect negatively somehow a Prosecco wine. Maybe if it has a little bit more acidity, it may be even better.
And is Prosecco a driving force behind these developments?
Yes, they supply money for it.
So do these plants have a name particularly, the promising ones?
Actually, we named it Glaurum, from Glera, mother, and Aurum, which is gold in Latin.
Glaurum. So when might we feasibly be able to taste the
2028.
2028 will be the first wines made from Glaurum?
No, the first set of plants may be sold to the producers.
So 2030, 2032?
Oh, well, 2030 may be the first wines which, if in Italy is promoted the acceptance to introduce those PIWI varieties which belong very close to the mother plant, yes. If they will oppose continuously, I will never see it. It really depends from the politics.
So that's breeding. Just very briefly, Riccardo, how do you see the future?
So by using breeding, you produce biodiversity. And biodiversity is needed. You never know the climate change where we'll go. So we must be ready with the good product for different conditions.
So retaining a focus on biodiversity is therefore the key in all of this. Is that right?
That's the key. That's the key word. Biodiversity, maintaining, and also exploring, because clearly we have done a breeding activity. I mean, as human being, 11,000 years ago, we started agriculture, and we have done breeding with cereals, with horticulture plants, thousand years, and changing the grain nowadays are totally different than the grain 100 years ago or 200 years ago. With wine, we have stopped more or less of the Roman period, or just a few years later, maintaining always the same varieties, just because we suppose we have reached the top. But we have not explored the potentiality of the grape genome at all. So by even doing other crosses in vinifera by vinifera would be interesting. Cabernet Sauvignon is a daughter plant between Cabernet Franc and Sauvignon Blanc. It's not a bad plant. It's not a bad wine.
It's all right wine, isn't it?
If nobody would have been done, we would not have Cabernet Sauvignon. So why stop the exploration is nonsense.
And how much of a reduction in treatments, in sprays, in pollution, therefore, are we talking about when it comes to these new generation of PIWIs?
Now we have glaurum in the field in production of grape since 5 years. And clearly in our experimental fields, we have glaurum and other sister plants beside the glera, clearly to compare the production and the phenology and so on. And we have not treated at all. So we decrease 10 to 20 times.
Yeah. So how many treatments would you, in an average year, would glera need?
Glera 15 to 20.
15 to 20 normally.
Average to 20, up to 20.
Wow. So you reduced it by a factor of
10.
10. Wow. Okay. So this very much sounds like the future, no?
Well, I mean, if people is not scared about the quality and give to this new product the same attention that has been done by all others varieties that are typical of the region, I may suppose that this plant may even substitute completely, because if those plants are not affected by fungi and produce a fantastic wine, in some decades they may substitute completely the known wine varieties. And this is what the people which are very conservative may be scared about.
Can you see that happening across the wine world, not just in Prosecco?
I dedicate such an effort in Prosecco region because I'm working mostly here, but we have done similar things with Sangiovese in Tuscany, with Primitivo in Puglia, and we will begin with Barolo and Barbera in Piedmont. So, I mean, if you never begin, you will never see the results. Then it's really a matter of people that believe in enology of those plants, the introduction in disciplinary of DOC. So in France, we have already in DOC, in Champagne already, some of the PIWI in French wine is already introduced. So I don't understand why in Italy, or better, I understand why, because there are lobbies which are very conservative. But if big consortium like Prosecco Doc start to fund this type of research, and then at the end will use those products, all the others will follow.
It's a brave new world. Riccardo, thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome. My pleasure. Thank you to you.
Okay, so some pretty hefty notions there. Firstly, disease-resistant vines may end up being better than their vinifera parent. In this case, glera, but it could be Chardonnay or Cabernet. That is a really incredible thought.
Yes.
You know, also his contention that these varieties may replace conventional ones completely.
Yeah, now that is quite something to get your head around, isn't it? You know, I think there's been a lot of thought and effort behind this development of disease-resistant vines for a few years now. Maybe it's gone a little bit under the radar, you know, but I do think we're about to see it explode onto the wine scene. You know, Riccardo's talking about a 10-fold reduction in sprays with no effect on quality, or actually possibly even better wines, and improving biodiversity along the way.
Yeah, and now that was interesting, wasn't it? You
Yes.
know, him saying biodiversity is the key. In essence, we need to develop a whole load of different kinds of new grapevines to suit different places or meet different challenges. I mean, it's not just one silver bullet for climate change and sustainability, but a lot of it depends on the politics and wider acceptance by winemakers and the public, when some people might just be a bit scared by all of this.
Yeah. Do you know what? That's key, isn't it? I think there's inevitably going to be some pushback in a sector as conservative as wine producers and wine drinkers. But I do think things are changing. You know, he told me that 10 years ago, he was considered a bit of a dreamer or a bit of a nut, you know, but now they've made the first wine from Glarum. It's looking really good, apparently. The big Prosecco players are backing it, it seems. So, you know, maybe it's a sign of things to come.
Now, one other thing you discussed with Riccardo and we want to bring in here is biotech.
Yes.
Now, we mentioned this at the top as an alternative approach to breeding in terms of generating new disease-resistant vines. And it's all to do with gene editing, isn't it?
Yeah. Now, I don't think we need to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. We are not biotech nerds. We are wine nerds. So we're probably going to oversimplify this, for which apologies. But hopefully we get the basics right. Essentially, we're talking about a new technique or technology, this CRISPR-Cas9, which can edit the vine's genome. In this case, to switch off the gene that allows the fungus or mildew to recognise the vine as its target and grow or spread. Now,
it's important, isn't it, here to stress that this is different from GMO or transgenics, in which foreign DNA is inserted. Here, nothing is added. It's just part of the vine's own DNA, the susceptibility gene, that is deactivated. So this is DNA-free genome editing. It's a relatively new technology, and it's opening up lots of possibilities.
Yeah, now what this produces is effectively a new clone of a classic variety. Now let's talk clones. To go back a step or two. At the moment, if you go to a vine nursery, you can buy hundreds of clones of Chardonnay, for example. Some developed in Burgundy, some in Argentina, some in Australia. Traditional clones are made by taking cuttings from the best performing vines and then reproducing them. So if the vine grower happens to notice one plant yields better than another, or grows tastier fruit, or is more resistant to mildew, they choose that plant to reproduce.
But in this method, the new clone of Chardonnay would be a gene-edited vine with specific resistance to mildew. So instead of waiting for this mutation to happen by chance and the vine grower noticing it, evolution is sped up in the lab. Hence the name for this new technique, assisted evolution, or TEA. And the results are specific and targeted.
I quite like tea.
Tea.
It's quite familiar.
Tea. We could just do tea.
Tea, yeah.
Afternoon tea.
Riccardo says he's a fan of biotech as well as breeding, and he describes biotech as a great opportunity that maybe will appeal to traditionalists who may prefer a Cabernet Sauvignon vine that's been tweaked for extra resistance rather than a PIWI variety. Ultimately, he says we'll need both breeding and biotech to give us a range of choices in the future.
And that future just got closer, because as of the 30th of September 2024, in a milestone event that has sailed surprisingly under the radar, the first gene-edited vines in Europe were planted out in a field in Italy in Valpolicella. Now, this potentially game-changing vineyard, Chardonnay for what it's worth, comes courtesy of Professor Mario Pezzotti and his team at the University of Verona, along with its private spin-off Edivite, which was founded in 2020.
Now, Mario is a leading figure in this field. He lives in Valpolicella, where life and work is intimately connected with the vine. He stresses that his work is not Frankenvine stuff. It's just a more targeted way of speeding up the natural process of mutation and disease resistance. He makes the point that all white wine is the result of a natural mutation. Wild vines almost always produce dark-skinned grapes, and we're okay with white wine, aren't we?
Very much okay. Big white wine fans in this household.
Indeed.
Nevertheless, the law is still a challenge. Mario has spent a lot of time wrangling with the authorities over restrictions on gene-edited or assisted evolution vines being planted out. But his persistence has paid off, because in July 2022, the law was amended to allow these trial plantings to go ahead.
So I asked him to describe what this momentous event meant to him.
Yeah, that momentous, I should say that it was a very emblematic momentum of my life, because it's been 44 years that I'm dreaming to put these plants out of the greenhouse. And the 30th of September, we were able to plant those plants in a field. It's a bunker. It's not a field, because it's limited by nets, 2 meter heights, and there are 10 plants with 250 square meters, and there are cameras watching those plants. And you cannot get inside because it's locked. There is a gate. But the 30th of September, 2024 for my life, I think it's an emblematic date, like the date that when my son was born, or a very important other day in which, when I married my wife.
Why was that date so emblematic, so important for you?
Because in this case, we were able to do a precise mutation, regenerate the plants, and put these plants in the field. And the evaluation in the lab said us that this plant is resistant to downy mildew, and we have to answer to everybody that this plant is also resistant to downy mildew in the fields.
So what are you hoping for? Are you hoping for no sprays whatsoever? Are you hoping for total resistance?
When I say it's resistant, I said I would like to insist that it's not immune. In this case, these plants are not immune, but they are plants that are resistant due to susceptibility genes. So there is a little infection, and we have to control the list of infection. But this infection is 6-10 times less than the infection that normally occurs. So I think we have to verify what it is, but we are predicting that very little spray should be done to avoid also the occurrences of other disease.
And at the moment you're developing something with specific reference to downy mildew, what about powdery mildew, botrytis, these other kinds of disease?
We rushed to have these plants in the field because we wanted to tell to everybody that this is possible, and we made it. But we have I think we have now 10 different varieties, and they are knockdown for genes, susceptibility genes for downy and powdery mildew, both.
So which other varieties might you be able to plant in the future on a trial basis?
Of course, here you can think about the Prosecco people. They are getting crazy for Glera. And Glera is a big market for the nurseries. So Glera, Chardonnay, Cabernet, Sangiovese, Nebbiolo, the Italian varieties, and the international. So I think we have a list of 10 varieties that are on the pipeline.
So you're hoping to be able to plant some more of these trials out very soon?
Let's say that the difficulties are not the plants, are the authorizations.
So let's talk about that. You've obviously fought hard to get this initial authorization. Do you think the law will be evolving soon to allow, to permit these varieties not just to be grown outside secure facilities, but then, to be able to made into wine and sold?
I don't have the glass ball, as you can imagine, but we are hoping, all the scientists working all over Europe, we are hoping that in 1 year, 1.5 years, this proposal that was almost accepted by the European Committee is going to be pushed further and approved by we are thinking about the Danish presidency of the Commission. I should say that please think about that innovation in plants. It's very slow because plants, they have their biology. And we people working with grape, we know that it takes years to have the grape ripened, 5 years to have the right grapes, to make the wine, all these things. So, but we need to be released. We need to have plants in the fields as much as possible. And also we need to have also the protection of those plants. This is an innovation that comes from years of work in the lab and competencies that needs to be protected.
Are you fearful that there may be reprisals, that there may be, action taken by people who think this is dangerous?
I hope that, that there won't be any vandalism, but who knows? There is room for everybody in this world. So there are also people not drinking wine. So I don't complain.
Scandalous. But for you, just to be very clear, this is totally safe technology that there's no risk of overspill, of outspill, of contamination, of, as you say, you use the word Frankenweins. There's no risk. This is safe, this technology that you're using. It's
a technology in which we can tell after the mutation operated by the machinery, we do the sequence again, we resequence. And we check if the mutation affects other places of the genomes or not. we check that it's only that mutation and nothing else, no off-targets problems. So this is ongoing stuff that for us now, the proof of concept is done. For instance, let me say, do you know how many Sangiovese clones are sold in Italy? Have you any idea? 340. So if you ask to the Rochedo nursery or many other nurseries, what is inside this clone? What did you change at the genomic level? What they wouldn't know exactly what happened to the genome or the epigenome. Nobody knows it. In this case, we know exactly that we did one single mutation for one gene, 2 genes, 3 genes, 4 genes, and we didn't touch any other place of the genome. This should not scare people at all.
Now, you said this was an emblematic moment for you, planting these plants out. Extrapolating, leaving your scientific rigor to one side for the moment and indulging your human emotions, what do you hope long term might be the result of this?
I hope that this wine world, which is quite traditional, will start to think that some innovation can be very useful to save the tradition and save the world of wine. Otherwise, it can be wiped off by many other things. So I think innovation is not an antagonistic process of tradition. Innovation is the process in which the best tradition is protected and saved for the next generation.
There's a great expression, isn't there, that tradition is innovation that's worked. In terms of timeline, if everything were to go as per your dreams, government, legislation, public acceptance, grower, wine trade, the wine world acceptance, when might we see wines made from these kind of vines?
5 years.
5 years, that's not very long.
5 years. Our planning, it's 5 years from now.
So you think we might be able to see wines from this technology available on sale in 5 years?
Yeah, the most restriction is to the registration of the clones. In Italy, it takes 5 years, but maybe we can we can shorten this phase.
Mario, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much to you.
Difficult to know where to start with that, but 5 years for wines made from potentially game-changing new super vines or bionic vines and to be available in a shop near you.
It's quite a thought, isn't it? As is, the notion they might help save the world of wine. And he did add that PIWIs are also important in this regard. He said this approach wasn't antagonistic to PIWIs and wouldn't render them redundant. There's room for everybody, he said. So a bit like Riccardo's views there. Taken together, these developments could, though, change the face of wine as we know it.
So we'll have to report back on how those trial plantings go. Meantime, we wanted to whiz off to a final pit stop in Champagne because all of the Italian experts we spoke to pointed to the fact that illustrious French appellations like Champagne and Bordeaux are allowing PIWIs or resistant vines. We're talking the likes of Sauvignac, Floréal, Sauvigny Gris and Vidocq Noir in Bordeaux, and then Voltis in Champagne.
These are still officially trials for the moment, with limits on how much can be planted or included in any blend. But initial take-up seems to have been relatively enthusiastic. So we spoke to Hugo Drappier, a 9th generation winemaker and viticulturist at Champagne House Drappier, which farms organically and which has made a point of planting all of the permitted grape varieties in Champagne, which now totals 8, including the PIWI Voltis.
Drappier's small 0.4 of a hectare Voltis vineyard was planted in 2023 as soon as regulations allowed around Hugo's house. It's early days. They made 1 Magnum in 2024, so quality in the bottle is yet to be properly assessed by them. But change is happening. Now, I asked Hugo for his take on Voltis.
It's very interesting to see how much is resistance. The vigor, the resistance to the mildew and oidium is very, very impressive. because being organic as we are very used to see the disease and how the vines react and what the disease can affect the vines. And when you're working on the vines like this without any using any fungicide, and you see how much it's resistant, is very impressive. For the moment, the grapes seems to be quite big, tends to be quite productive compared to the variety that we used to have in Champagne. And the ripening is late, very late compared to what we have. So for the 6 kilograms of Voltis we had this year on our 0.4 hectares, we harvested 15 days after the rest of the harvest.
In terms of reducing any sprays that you use, I know you're organic, but what are you anticipating in terms of a reduction in having to treat the vines in any way at all?
We can say that the reduction is total. We can be happy to at that point to work with this variety without any spraying.
What would you normally spray?
Being organic, it's very variable compared to the condition of the year. So for the easy, the most easy vintage, I would say it's between 6 to 8 spraying a year. But for the very, very difficult year, like this year, for example, it's more than 20, 25, 30 spraying.
Now, some people might be quite surprised that a region as traditional as Champagne is allowing hybrids to be planted.
The first region in France to have, as a appellation d'origine contrôlée, to have a hybrid cépage, yes.
And what are your thoughts on that?
I'm not, I will not say that is maybe the future will be in these grapes. I think it's just one step forward looking for the next generation. And we have to evolve. The climate, the people waiting, the consumption, the climate, everything is changing around the world. Thinking of the wine has been since 150 years focused on only 10 French or international grapes that will last forever. I think it's very false. We have to think about the future. And this one will be one of the tools.
And if you talk now, just finally, about the idea that adopting Voltis is as kind of a stepping stone, do you think the future of wine is going to be PIWIs or conventional vines or a mixture of the two or something completely different?
Yeah, difficult to answer this question. We don't know, but my own opinion, I would say that this kind of grapes will be part of the future. Our hope will be part of the diversity, because it helps to fight against the big problem we have for the climate and the future. So I'm sure it will be part of it. I hope it will be not the 100% of the future of the grapes, and will still be able to farm our classic and very important grapes like the Pinot we have, even if it's sensitive to disease. I just hope, I cross finger that in the future, I don't know, maybe in 100 years, exactly like we have with the Porte-Greffe, the grafted grapes due to phylloxera, that will still have the possibility to have both and work on it. And this diversity is nice to have it.
Hugo, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So again, a potentially massive reduction in sprays from 30 to 0, and it's really interesting to see that comparison with organic treatments, isn't it, as we discussed earlier. And also a recognition that change is imperative and it needs to be embraced, even in somewhere like Champagne. Yeah,
and just to be clear, the first possible time these grapes could be in a Champagne on our shelves would be 2028 to 2030. And initially it'll be limited to a maximum of 10% of the blend. But it sounds like the Voltis wines will have good acidity, which is what you want in Champagne.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, so much to take on board in this episode, I know. But I know what we need to do before we draw things to a close to help in that regard. And that's just enjoy some delicious wines, tasting, recommending, just to take the edge off things.
I think we might have earned it. So yeah, we've been tasting lots of PIWI wines recently. Some do still have that wet dog or stewed nettle or even plastic doll character. Some are just bad, but as Nicola says, that can be true of conventional wines too.
Absolutely.
Generally speaking, though, we've actually been impressed, haven't we, by the new generation of PIWI wines?
We have, and I've got one here. I'm going to go straight in. The Tesco Finest Floreal 2023. It's £8, or actually £6 on offer. Now, if ever there was proof of concept, this is it. The UK's biggest retailer sticking a PIWI wine at a fighting price point in their posh own label range. That's a statement of intent. And it's absolutely spot on, isn't it? It's clean, it's fresh, it's kind of pure, peachy, appley. It's just really easy going. It's gentle, refreshing. If Pinot Grigio is your bag, tuck into this. It's also, I know some on the bottle, relatively low alcohol too, at 11%. So, boom, what is not to like?
Now, next up is a good value rosé, the Esprit Artisan Sauvignon Gris 2023, made by Foncalieu, and it's £10 to £13. And what you've got here is classic berry fruit, some apple rind, dried herb aromas. It's dry, it's got some nice texture, sort of plummy warmth. It's good with food, and again, good value, spot on.
Just a shame about the naughty clear bottle, really, isn't it? Anyway, let's
enough.
move on. I want to give
that,
a couple of wines from Nicola's stable a shout out. First, his Renitens 2022. It's a blend of 8 resistant varieties, and it's very sort of yeasty and leesy and meaty. It's almost like a sort of Chablis on the nose, and then very textured and stony on the palate. It's very classy. And then also the Divento 2022 from Veneto. This is an oak-aged blend of Brona and Johannita that's nutty, creamy, it's sort of lemony and succulent and complex, isn't it? So, you can do this more serious oaky style of white with PIWIs too.
Absolutely, yeah. And finally, 2 cheeky reds, the La Colombette Cabernet Noir 2022, which has got nice, bright, brambly aromas and then a sort of juicy, herby, plummy palate. It's not the most serious, but it's light and juicy and very quaffable. And then the Sauvage Cabernet Cortis 2022 from Bordeaux, no less. A bit more funky and firm, but still very satisfying. Both perfect Tuesday night quaffers, dare I say it.
Dare away. Right, time to wrap things up. By way of closing summary, the world of wine looks set for a generational change. The demands of sustainability mean fruit from a new breed of vines is coming to our glasses, the result of innovative breeding and possibly gene editing if regulations allow. As for how well these wines will go down with us wine drinkers, only time will tell.
Now, we'll put all the wine details and links on our website show notes. Thanks to our interviewees, Nicola Biasi, Riccardo Velasco, Mario Pezzotti and Hugo Drappier. And thanks to you for listening. Until next time, cheers.